Well, how much have
And
you been reading up on the GTX 1080 and 1070?
I was reading up a little bit about it. Right now I know they're going to be using the same amount of RAM, and there's no shady shit like with the GTX 970 where you get 3.5 gigabytes of one type of RAM and then 500 megabytes of another, which was crap. I know they're all going to have the same kind of RAM. I think the 1080 is going to have the GDDR5X versus the GDDR5 and the 1070.
Which for clarification, because if anybody's watching this is like, well, what's GDR? Geez, it's hard to say. GDDR5X. It's GDDR5. It's faster. That's it. GDDR5X is basically DDR5 or GDDR5 running at 10 gigahertz or higher. That's
versus what, 7 or 8? I think it's 8.
well, GDDR5 goes all the way down to like 2,000 or 3,000 megahertz. I mean, when it first launched years and years ago on the Radeon 4870, I'd have to look up the specs, but it was pretty damn slow. But regular DDR5 classification will go up to about 7 gigahertz,
Right.
which, that's really the only difference between the two. So it's not actually any different there. But yeah, the reason why they don't have to play any shady stuff with the RAM is because they're both actually 256-bit buses.
Right.
On the previous generation, the 980 and the 970, they had to differentiate it a little bit because, otherwise the 970 would be too close. There was no faster tier of RAM available at the time. So that's the reason why they can now have the same bus, and then there's no shady crap with the RAM. The big thing is, and I actually called it, I predicted this. I knew that the 1070 would be more powerful than the Titan X. It's going to be roughly about twice as fast as the GTX 970. And they're saying it'll be about 70% faster, but you got to figure with driver updates and whatnot. By the end of the day, it'll probably be roughly twice as powerful. My real thing with this is, and over on some forums, I've had a lot of people, they've come up and they're like, oh, CPU won't be an issue. CPU is fine.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, CPU is already a bottleneck on a Titan X. The 6700K overclocked to 4.6 gigahertz will bottleneck a Titan X at 1080p. Digital Foundry has done videos on this, and they've proved that the CPU is already a bottleneck. Now we have a $350 video card that most people are going to buy, just like the 970.
I think you're crazy if you don't. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Oh yeah, no, you'd be insane. I mean, the 1080 is great, but I honestly don't think it's worth the extra money.
Hello.
At least not right now. Games and things will change, but the 1070 is going to be the hot seller, and we all know that. But my big thing is, right now I'm running a 4690K. I run it at 4.4 gigahertz 24/7 overclock. When I'm playing Witcher 3 and I'm running, CPU stress test like Digital Foundry does, because I found that spot in Novigrad to be pretty taxing on the CPU, like they do. My CPU usage and my GPU usage will battle for who's hitting 100%. So one of them is bottlenecking the other one at any given time. Now, if I was running twice the graphics power, there is no way that this CPU will be able to feed enough data, to the GPU. If I had a Titan X in here, it would not be possible. So what my thing is why is nobody talking about this? Everybody's just saying, oh yeah, this is great, this is fantastic. The fastest CPU you can buy for gaming is the 6700K. It's better than the 8-core, I forget what it is, 50 whatever 100X, $1,000 CPU. The 6700K in gaming is faster. And that's not going to be able to keep up with a 1070, let alone the 1080. So I have no idea what people are going to do.
The only theory I had regarding that is people are extremely confident that DirectX 12 will reduce the load on the CPU so that you won't bottleneck.
That is my only hope. That is the saving grace. But, I mean, even that has really been yet to be seen.
Yeah, it's been talked about. I mean, numbers have been thrown out and whatnot. I mean, obviously, we have to see it in the wild first. people can stress test it all they want. Until I see it, on my own computer, it's going to be difficult for me because obviously everybody has a wide range of computers. But if you're talking about the only thing that could prevent it, you're right. It's got to be, or you're right. It's going to bottleneck. So it's got to be DirectX 12. And I know DirectX 12 is releasing.
Well, I mean,
soon.
It's already out. DirectX 12 games are out.
Well, yeah, the games are going to be they're DirectX 12 compatible, but DirectX 12 is not out yet.
Yes, it is.
When?
Are you running Windows 10?
Yeah.
It's on there.
It's not that I'm aware of. Okay.
DirectX 12 launched with Windows 10.
Well, then I feel stupid. I guess I wasn't paying attention.
It's all right. I'm sure there's other people watching this probably thinking the same thing. But yes, DirectX 12 has been out for a while. The Gears of War that was ported over, Gears of War Ultimate, that runs on DirectX 12. Ashes of the Singularity, that runs DirectX 12. Quantum Break on PC, that runs DirectX 12 only. Pretty much all the stuff that Microsoft's porting over, they're going to be DirectX 12 only.
Well, then that's going to be the only hope, is that the games will be optimized well enough that DirectX 12 will take the load off the CPU and allow the GPU to take all the power it needs. And that's the only way it could work. I can't see another way.
Yeah, I really hope so. And obviously, now that we're talking about DirectX 12, I really hope that NVIDIA has fixed whatever issues that they were having on the 9 series, fixed it on their 10 series, because AMD is kicking the shit out of the 9 series GPUs in any of these DirectX 12 titles. I take it you haven't seen the benchmarks, like your Quantum Breaks and stuff like that. Well, the 390 is basically the same price point as the 97, the GTX 970. Right. So price points are about the same. However, the 390 is performing about 40% better than the 970, roughly, in these titles in DirectX 12. So it'd be it's very important for NVIDIA to get this right. Obviously, we'll know in a couple of weeks. This is just speculative, and I would assume that they have it figured out by now. But it's really kind of disheartening that the GTX 9 series GPUs, once DirectX 12 becomes a thing, and we no longer have a DirectX 11 version to utilize, I don't know how well those are going to really hold up. And it feels like we may be forced into these new GPUs or to AMD.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily feel forced anyway. Looking at the 1070 and the specs for $350 or whatnot, I don't see why I wouldn't upgrade. Even if I was getting great performance from my 970, which I mean it is a 970, I'd still want to upgrade to that 1070 for that price. I feel like the performance gain alone is going to be worth it. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't feel like at that point I'd be being forced. I feel like at that point I'd have the opportunity to get even, especially if they will run better with DirectX 12. I mean, you're telling me that the 1070 is going to be probably by the end of the day twice as powerful as the 970. Well, if the 970 is already going to be underperforming with the DirectX 12 title, then that sounds like just one more reason, not necessarily the reason, but one more reason for me to get to a 1070, because if it's straight up 2 times as powerful, but I'm being held back on a game with DirectX 12, it's going to be even better with a 1070.
Yeah, one would assume. But from the sound of things, it looks like that they figured it out because they weren't using the asynchronous compute. There are plenty of videos to explain exactly how that goes. It's kind of complicated. But basically, that's the reason why the AMDs are doing better, is because DirectX 12 takes advantage of that. And of course, this is what this is what takes the load off of your CPU. Is basically the GPU can thread out more. Instead of doing things in a line and in order, they can do things out of order. That's generally the easy version of it. But it's very exciting. But how do you feel about AMD's Polaris basically just being equivalent to performance as the 390 and 390X?
Well, I didn't read that. In fact, I was just reading before we started talking about the Polaris and the specs that were pretty much showing it with on par performance to the 1070 and 1080 for the Polaris 10 and 11 chips.
No, from what AMD's been saying, Polaris is not meant to be a high-end chip. Polaris 11 is meant to basically be a notebook chip, low power, and Polaris 10's kind of more your mainstream. Performance-wise, they're not going for performance. They're going for performance per watt. It's basically what they're going for.
Hang on. I'm pulling it up right now. So what I'm looking at says, unless this is just bad information, it's entirely possible. I'm not going to say it's not. It says 8 gigabytes VRAM, 256 bus, 2304 GCN 4.0 cores, which is better than the previous cores. It's going to be lower numbers, kind of like the shaders on the from Pascal to Kepler to Pascal, or Maxwell, Kepler to Maxwell. The cores went down, but performance went up. It says kind of the same things happening here, but that's what I'm looking at. And it talks about the specs being leaked and being comparable, but maybe it's bad information, which is entirely possible. This is what I was reading, and I thought, well, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, Polaris hasn't officially been announced. I mean, there's been plenty of leaks. It's kind of like the PS4 Neo. None of it's actually fact, yet. But from everything that I was reading on Polaris, the AMD's kind of doing what they did with their HD 4000 series. They're not shooting for the high end. They're not shooting for the top tier. That's what their Vega cards are going to be going for next year. That's when your 1080 Ti's and your 1080 Titans will come out around the same time. But
what? You're right. Actually, I'm looking at it right. It's the Vega 10 that I'm looking at. The article is about the Polaris, but it also lists the Vega 10, and I think that's my fault. I didn't differentiate in my head what I was looking at, so I apologize. You are correct.
Okay, well, I haven't heard anything about Vega yet. I'm assuming that that's starting to leak because the 1080 and the 1070 have been leaked, and they will be more powerful.
Yeah, this reference, in fact, it specifically references the 1080 and 1070, so it must be brand new information, or at least recent information that I see.
Okay, well, I mean, that's pretty cool. The way I look at it is, it looks like AMD with Polaris, they're going for the $200 to $300 market, or the $150 to $300 market. And they're basically going to give you, 390X performance with half the power draw for about half of the price. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because that's going to destroy everything NVIDIA has. Because NVIDIA is going to put all their money into the 1080 and the 1070. You're not going to see any 1060s for a long time. They're going to dump all their money into these high-end chips like they always do. And AMD, I think, is going to come in and swoop up, because 90+% of your people run the $150 to $300 mark. That's where everybody lives.
Right.
I mean, everybody above that, that's the high margin stuff, which is great for the companies, but they don't sell in volume quite like that segment does. I think it's good. I think AMD's going to have a nice little segment. I think NVIDIA is going to have a segment. What's really kind of funny is I think that AMD is going to get a lot of momentum back that they lost. And I think we're going to have a much more competitive NVIDIA, or they're going to have to be more competitive. Like, remember when the Fermis came out, the 400 series, and AMD just kicked the shit out of them. They had better performance, they had lower TDP, they had better, you could buy them because they couldn't produce enough of the 400 series. I think that's probably what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be quite as drastic. Because I don't think the TDP power levels on the 1070 and 1080 is that bad. I mean, 185 watts. That's nothing on the 1080. So,
no, not at all. You're right. That's nothing.
Yeah. So, I like I said, I think everything's good. I think all the price points are going to be hit. My biggest concern, like I started everything off with, was CPU. Unless DirectX 12 starts coming out in waves and all games start supporting it straight away, I think we're going to be in a little bit of trouble with some of the late DirectX 11 generation stuff. Like I said, like Witcher 3 and really, really taxing games, or bad ports like Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight's another game which will just hammer the crap out of your CPU. And it doesn't really matter how fast your GPU is. You need a faster CPU. But, I mean, that was just a bad port to... so that's not really the computer's fault, but you can't really say that about Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is just a demanding title. So, Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, and we'll see what the benchmarks say here in a couple of weeks. Obviously, I'm gonna wait and hold off before I get mine and see what the best deal is. What about you?
When did it say they're releasing?
May 25th or 24th, the 1080 will be out, so about 2 weeks. And then the 1070 is June 10th.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so they're right around the corner. I think the Founders Edition thing's a little silly, where the reference cooler design costs more, but whatever. As long as, you know, the good aftermarket cooler versions are cheaper, I think that'd be all right.
Right.